a question for Miguel. I'm just wondering if you could give some examples as to why those various organizations that you just named do not consider independent contractors.
Well, it's from my understanding of the rules of employment. So the rules of employment, the ABCs of contracting is, number one, I'm telling you where to show up. That's an employment clause. If I'm telling you you need to start at 7 and you end at 3:30 and you get a 1-hour lunch, and I'm telling you to build that fence, those are rules of employment. So those are clearly defined in EDD as that is not an independence. Number one. Number two, if you don't have a contractor's license, you're not independent, you're an employee.
Okay.
So there are very strict standards. And then, now, those of us in the commercial world, in public works arena, we understand this, but those that are doing residential work, if you're going to, if you're going to Home Depot or Lowe's and picking up a additional supplemental workforce, none of them file EDD. Everyone has 1099s. Every single person that they bring on is a 1099 employee because they don't want to pay taxes on the cash wages that they paid out, because that's what they're doing. They're paying cash wages at the end of the day. That's an expense. I'm not going to eat that expense. I'm going to file a 1099 and move that expense to them. And so that's the where IRS says, well, where's your 1099 filings? What are the addresses? What are the social security numbers? They don't match. They don't connect. And so all of a sudden it blows up on them. And then EDD will say, these are employees. You now need to pay unemployment insurance for them. That's the first phase, and then obviously workman's comp and FTB, IRS. So they all come after the contractor after that point.
Thank you, Joel. But I think, like, obviously from our sunset bill, and appreciate Ms. Past Chair Love, all the hard work on the sunset bill. Moving forward, like, as everyone understands, currently it's January 1st, 2028, where all licensees need workers' comp. So what we're talking about today is trying to figure out the best approach to file some sort of exemption for workers' comp for these licensees. You know, what we're talking about is potential $5,000 maximum for these licensees that self-certify that they have no employees. Again, in my opinion, that could be a really big electrical job. That could be a good sized plumbing job, right? So if me as a board, that's a really big heating and air conditioning job. So it could be more, and the whole purpose of that, for having a C20 being exempt, was because there was so much underground activity in that space. So as for the consumers of California, and I'll repeat what David Folk said, for Jason Perez, is like, if the board chooses to do something like this, we need to make sure the consumers know what the maximum is allowable for this contractor. So that way all the contractors, it's kind of like self-certifying for themselves. They know you could only do a $2,500 job, period, on the website. And then that way the consumer, when they look them up, they know they can only do a $2,500 job. In big picture, like, I appreciate all the hard work on this, but like, I think that maximum is too high currently.
You know, you said something there that triggered something in the back of my head here. Yeah, it is a big job. $5,000, that's a lot. Water heaters, for instance, replacements. But again, if they don't have a license and they're doing this without a license, they're not gonna be able to get that permit to get that inspected. So I don't know how you go there and put an amount. I don't like the amount, to be honest with you. I wish it was a lot lower, like 250, not 5,000. And those are small little repairs maybe that somebody's doing, replacing a faucet, or maybe changing out an outlet or whatever. It's minimal. It's not something that needs to be really looked at. But when you start getting higher and higher, people start doing, well, I only did this part on this job and only charged $4,000. Well, then I came back 2 weeks later and I did this part of this job and I did $4,000. And then 2 weeks later I did this part of the job was $4,000. Yeah, he did $12,000 worth of work, but he did it over a month and a half and he did $12,000 worth of work. So he stayed underneath the $5,000 mark. I don't like it. I think it's a bad move. And that's just my own opinion on it because I'm looking at it from an enforcement side of where I'm at and how people could skate around it by using certain ways to make things work out. Having a contract of something, having a contract with somebody to do all this work, but to piecemeal it all together and make it where it's really low. So they can make that mark of $5,000 a lot lower than $5,000.
And that's for our board discussion. Like, this is a proposed legislation that our board would have to sponsor. So if our board members feel like that 5,000 max is too high, then we need to be discussing it. We could have that lower. This is just proposed from Chief of Legislation Rebecca may help put this together with the Workers' Comp Committee. So with that, I'll stop because I know there's some other questions, I think.
Maybe more comments, and I'd be happy to. And I know Miguel and I worked a long time on this, and as you all recall, I was, this is to get our sunset bill extension. So this is negotiations pretty much. I mean, I was against any of it, but I wanted to come up with something to get us to continue on to be palatable to legislation. So I'm happy to take amendments to further this. And after public comment, of course, and after more board comment. But I think this is just get us through, and I want to thank Rebecca for putting me in touch, and I know we'll be working on this with legislators as far as the state workers' compensation fund, because I feel they have to come up with a way where everybody's required to have it, and there should be a way you put like a $2,000 or $1,000 a down payment, or the total fund, and if you prove throughout that year you didn't employ anybody, you get that back or something. So they would, in my opinion, get a slew of applicants using their fund, and if they didn't use it, they'd get it back. So that's kind of what I was looking at. So any other comments from the board before to go to public comment?
Just another question. I noticed in this some of the proposed language here that there are obviously the progressive fine amounts up to a maximum of $30,000 per instance. I'm just curious about, and Register folk mentioned earlier that at a certain point, or at any point really, a contractor's license could be suspended. So I'm curious about, you know, for repeat violators, right? Because it sounds, my understanding is that this is an ongoing issue over the past several years. At what point is a contractor's license revoked and or suspended indefinitely? Because it sounds like we can continue to fine them if they're violating, you know, this proposed legislation. But at what point is, from a consumer protection perspective, is this particular contractor, you know, violating the law in multiple instances? What point does that stop?
Yeah, if I could, that's a very good question. Thank you. It was probably about 4 years ago that we did have some budget difficulties at CSLB, and at that time we were focusing more on issuing administrative citations than accusations. Now, with our budget being where it's at, that is not the case today. And I want to be real clear to any contractors that think it's okay to get repeated complaints. It's not. And so the administrative fine that we're talking about would be an administrative citation only, as I mentioned earlier. And it's a situation where we're going to require that contractor show that they have workers' comp after they've been fined. So you're not likely to see repeat offenders. But one thing I've been working very closely with Steve on, and with his leadership in the enforcement division, if we believe a contractor is going to reoffend, we do not want to issue that administrative citation. We want to go to an accusation. The accusation is to suspend or revoke the license, and it puts a contractor on probation. It requires a disciplinary bond. We can recover our investigative costs. And moving forward, that's what we got to focus on, because we're receiving too many complaints. We want less complaints. We want people to hire a licensed contractor, have an enjoyable, satisfactory experience with that, and not have to file a complaint. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Registrar Folkton, correct me if I'm right, how we do it. I believe Board Member Galarza came up with, they're going to be required to sign something in penalty of perjury that they have workers' comp.
Yeah, and I don't know that it was mentioned, but one of the advantages to the proposal as well is that it would roll the 2028 date for, back to 2027 for, you know, having contractors be required to have it. But yeah, it's, as far as that form, that's gonna be so helpful in filing a complaint with the district attorney. We didn't talk about it today, but there's a grant program that the Department of Insurance funds prosecution of workers' comp fraud. And one of the barriers that you have when you go down to file your complaint is the deputy DA will say, well, did the contractor really understand they needed to have workers? With that form, you walk into the DA's office, show them the form, they knew it, they signed it, they took this 10-question test. There's no question about it, they need to get prosecuted.
Thank you, Registrar Folkton. Any comments, further comments or questions from board members? Yes.
I'm assuming that those questions will be done in multiple languages, right?
You are correct. We will make sure that happens.
I just want to say that I'm in support of Mr. Barton's, if he decides to do another type of a proposal about putting money in a fund and then at the end, the contractor getting their monies back. I think that that's a great idea. People like to have their money back, so they generally abide by the rules.
Thank you, Board Member Love. All right, any more comments or questions from the board?
I think there was also one stipulation that mentions, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if a contractor is found in violation, they have pretty much revoked their opportunity to ever file an exemption moving forward. So, so that is a draconian step, but intended to, you can stop being a contractor. But you've already proven that you don't understand the concept of exemption.
All right, thank you. Any further board comments? All right, seeing no further board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on the agenda item?
Thank you. I'm Rick Piers. I'm forwarding this message from Phil Vermeulen. He is on the webcast, but doesn't have a way to verbally put. So here's his statement, and I actually have two, but I'll go after. The first one is on behalf of the Flasher Barricade Association. While they're disappointed in the postponement of the 2026 date, they strongly support the proposal. That's from the Flasher Barricade Association. Okay. I'm Phil's secretary sometimes. This is also for Phil Vermeulen, but this is on behalf of HCC, the American Contractors Indemnity, who write a large portion of the bonds for licensed contractors. They are offering to look forward. They look forward to discussing the idea of requiring an additional bond, if that is so thought out. And they haven't had the opportunity to discuss it, but look forward to meeting with the registrar and interested parties about a possible bond that could be used in some situation.
Thank you.
Good morning. Richard Marcus, and I represent a variety of specialty subcontractors, including C7, C10, C16, C36, Western Electrical Contractors, Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California. Like Phil, I think my clients are disappointed at moving backwards. They supported the initial legislation to do away with the contractor exemption. And the other thing, to Board Member Ruane's comments, unfortunately, it's the legitimate contractors that are paying for the investigation and the penalties. And although the $10,000 penalty for failure to have workers' compensation is persuasive on the surface, I would remind the board that DLSE only collects about 15 to 20% of wage and hour penalties that are assessed for wage and hour violations. And so my guess is, and this is not based upon any study of what the potential outcome will be, is I will be surprised if the board collects more than 10 to 20% of any penalties that are assessed for failure to have workers' compensation. So I'm not sure that revenue is going to support the investigation part of it. And finally, I know this was an issue that was very important to Senator Dodd and to Senator Ashby to resolve this, but I've not heard a single complaint from any of the members of any of my contractor associations about doing away with the exemption provision. And, you know, that's obviously going to be a factor based upon the size of the organizations and who belongs. There's a tremendous population of the contractor community that don't belong to trade associations. But I would be curious to know, aside from probably a couple of very vocal constituents that had the ears of some of the senators or members of the legislature, how big of a problem this is for the contractor community. And I'm certainly sympathetic for somebody who is truly a sole practitioner, that is primarily doing service and repair and is not going out to Home Depot or anywhere to 1099 a bunch of folks to assist them in it. And I'm sympathetic when they realize what a minimum premium workers' compensation policy is for no benefit whatsoever. But you know, without knowing the details of how big of a population is going to be, you know, conceivably dropping their contractor license because of this requirement. This may be premature to pursue this. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments or questions? All right, as a reminder, the Legislative Committee did not have time to meet prior to this board meeting. Therefore, a motion and a second is required for all legislative voting items. Would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal to allow for an exemption from the workers' compensation requirement? Or with the chair's approval, an amendment for the motion?
I would like to make some amendments to the written proposal. So just from hearing the discussion here today, I appreciate all the board members' discussion. It sounds like there is, we have to move forward. Sunset legislation is trying to make sure there is some sort of exemption forward. I appreciate all the hard work. We got to do something. I think what was clear was being able to push this exemption date was the 27th of January 1st, which was great. I still think the maximum limit is too high. If it's a single person, that maximum limit should be, in my opinion, in the $2,000 range. So I'll make the motion to approved as presented with the amendment of the maximum being $2,000.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Mark. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion. Kobos.
Thank you. Are there any discussion on the amendment to the motion? We have a regularly moved second, and do I have a call for the question? That would be to vote on it, or?
Call for the question.
Okay.
Diana Love.
All right, thank you. So, thank you. Robin, would you please take a roll call vote?
Chair Barton, I think you should ask for public comment on the amendment.
Well, thank you,
just to
sir.
correct.
All right, is there the public comment on the amendment to the motion, which would be decreasing the value from $5,000 to $2,000?
Rick Pierce, representing Basic Crafts Workers' Comp Program. We strongly support the idea of lowering it to $2,000.
Thank you.
Mark Connerly, Roofing Contractors Association of California again. I would respectfully ask that it be lowered to 1,000 to remain consistent with the new limit for maintaining a license. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that comment. Any other comments from the public? All right, it stands on the floor with amendment to the motion, which is lowering the amount from $5,000 to $2,000. Robin, would you please take a roll call vote?
Sure. Before I vote, the motion is to approve as presented with an amendment of decreasing what amount exactly? What is the amount, the limit of what?
The amendment, or the motion would be Approve as presented with the maximum allowable to actually do work, exemption work of $2,000.
Okay.
And my request, if this is passed, is IT, specifically make sure this is noted on the public website that this particular contractor can only do work up to $2,000 because they are saying they are exempt
Okay,
from workers' comp.
thank you.
And all the other stipulations apply. That's the only change to the motion.
And that maximum value is in 7125B on page 79 of the materials.
Okay, ready?
I'm ready.
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
No.
Joel Barton,
Yes.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo has an excused absence. Jacob Lopez has an excused absence. Diana Love. Aye. Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
No.
Joseph Preciado. Aye. Jim Ruane.
No.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tyker both have excused absences. Motion passes 7-3.
Thank you, board members. And thank you very much for your discussion, and this will be ongoing.
Okay, can I make a few comments? I appreciate I think one of the issues too is because of the minimum being raised to $1,000 come January 1st, we got kind of stuck in a hard spot. So that was why my amendment was for 2,000, just double what the minimum was currently. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Mark. All right, now moving on to the next item on our agenda. Review, discussion, and possible action on 2025 proposed legislation. Agenda item 3 consists of legislative proposals for the board to consider sponsoring in 2025. Again, by sponsoring these proposals, the board will authorize staff to find a legislator to carry these proposals on behalf of CSLB and will negotiate amendments with the legislature as needed. Between each item, I will call for the members to discuss and take public comment. Starting with agenda item 3A, a proposal to add accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, to the definition of home improvement and contractors law. This proposal can be found in the materials on page 87. As you are certainly aware, CSLB has received a significant number of consumer file complaints regarding contractors failing to complete ADU construction projects. These complaints allege a contractor was paid for work that was not completed and materials that were not delivered, causing significant financial harm. CSLB held a legislative committee meeting on September 18th to hear from the public regarding ways to improve consumer protection in contractors' law, and this proposal reflects those discussions. ADUs are not expressly mentioned in contractors' law, but are defined in the government code as an attached or detached residential dwelling unit providing complete independent living on a lot with a proposed or existing primary residence. By adding ADUs to the definition of home improvement in contractors' law, we can ensure contractors engaging in ADU projects are subject to existing rules regarding how they can collect payment from consumers. Contractors are prohibited from charging a down payment of more than $1,000 or 10% of a home improvement contract, whichever is less. Contractors can establish a payment schedule for the balance of what they are owed, but cannot request or accept payments that exceed the value of the work performed or materials delivered. These payment requirements are generally referred to as progress payments. Including ADUs in the definition of home improvement will provide additional consumer protection by clearly requiring contractors to adhere to the same progress payment rules for ADUs as they do for other home improvement projects. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item?
I have a question. So ADUs, I deal with them a lot, and there's different types of ADUs that you have, and it's not considered, I don't consider them home improvement because it's not part of the home, it's part of the lot. But when you're talking about 10% or $1,000 is the minimum, whichever's less, when you're looking at an ADU and you have something that's already been manufactured that cost $150,000 and all they're doing is taking it and dropping it into a location, that $1,000 is not even be close to being enough for that to happen. So I don't know how you get to $1,000 or 10% is never gonna be less than $1,000, so it's always gonna be $1,000. I don't know how you get to that amount and making it where the contractor's getting enough to actually make sure that that progress of what they need to do to build or put that ADU on site has enough to get that started, even to move forward, or, you know, to get that going. I mean, even just the plans alone cost more than $1,000 to get that even drawn up. So I don't know how that works out where the $1,000 comes into play and not just a straight 10% to make it work both ways.
Yeah,
Registrar Poe.
excuse me, if I could touch on that. That is one concern, is where the ADU is on the property and not connected to the home itself. And so this would clarify that if it's residential, if it's zoned for residential, that we would consider that ADU to be in a way an extension of the existing house, and the home improvement contract requirements would apply. So that's one thing this bill would do. We know that many building departments, perhaps most, would consider an ADU to be new construction, and that's done for the purposes, from what I've seen, of collecting different types of taxes and fees. But as far as the second question, we have a significant problem with ADU here in the state of California. There's just no question about it. We've had one contractor, Steve, reported that we've received more than 300 complaints. And when we look at the complaints themselves, the majority of these consumers have paid the contract price in full, or at least 80% of it, and they have no ADU, or they have nothing to show for it. The plans are an issue. What we're proposing, and what I would like for Board Member Pinelli to assist with, is to create a video. He mentioned the plans. What is the value of the plans? That is so important. The problem, though, with the plans is, does the consumer have possession of them? I've been told that many building departments provide plans at no cost, but we don't always know that. So we need to have some idea as to when payment can be made. When should payment of the plans be made? Should the consumer be in possession of those plans? Can they actually get them from the building department if the contractor is the one that submitted them? We need to address that. And we also understand that they could be pre-manufactured, and that does pose a problem. We also know many contractors have revolving accounts. What we know right now is we have a tremendous problem where we have a lot of consumers that have lost their life savings because they paid money for something that they do not have, and we need to get those cases prosecuted. Taking $200,000 from a consumer for the purpose of providing an ADU and not providing an ADU, in my opinion, is a criminal offense. And so that's what this law would do. This proposal will tighten this up. Currently, if you request or accept payments in advance of work performed for home improvement, that's a misdemeanor. One of the problems is you go down to file the case, the DAs aren't all that receptive to it because there probably won't be any jail time. I don't know if we talked about that, but this would assist with this. This would put a minimum, like it's 10 days in jail, I think we talked about. That would be so powerful to go down to a DA and say, here's a solid case. You could look at the felony aspect of it, which is 44B of the Business Professions Code. That's where you receive money and you divert it to another use. But short of that, it's straightforward. The contract provided for a payment that violated the law. The contractor accepted it. If nothing else, we need the misdemeanor conviction.
Thank
Two
you,
things.
Registrar Poe.
Oh, sorry. Two things. One, I understand exactly what you're saying. I agree with you. I think there has to be some communication with the consumers of the steps of payment, the steps of monies, and the steps of how you go about going forward and moving forward with certain aspects of, one, the job card or the permit or the plan or whatever you're doing, and to know how those steps are. Because like you're saying, a lot of people, here's $200,000 and we're going to start doing this, and they come back and there's just a pad of concrete and nothing else there. And the person's gone. So knowing that, you know, there's these steps, because we make contractors look, you know, where I'm from in San Francisco, consumers look to the permit of, did it meet this stage, did it meet that stage? Just like banks, they don't give back out, you know, they'll do a loan and they'll fund half of it. And when you hit a certain stage and they show that the movement on permits and everything that's moved forward, then the rest of the money is released for them to complete a project. So I think consumers need to know that as well. The second part I was going to say, was you mentioned, was being a part of the home, attached to the home. these ADUs, if they have a separate address, you know, how's it addressed? Is it separate? Is it part of that parcel? Is it separate from that parcel? Can the person turn around and have that ADU and make it where it's its own entity and becomes its own thing? Then all of a sudden now you come into a different realm. So just got to be careful on that, because when we say it's a part of the home, when I'm hearing it's a part of the home, that means it's attached to that home. It's actually a part of that, where you can access it from that home, through that home, as a part of that home. Not its own entrance, not its own, you know, egresses and all that, where it's a separate entity. So we got to make sure, if we're saying it's a part of that home, that it doesn't have to, it can be detached, it can be separated from it. So just the definitions on how we, you know, put it with codes and verbiage, and how it all relates to each other is important piece of that puzzle. And I would love to help you out with that video if you want, and talking to consumers would be, I think it's a helpful thing, because a lot of people have no clue what's happening.
Yes, and your assistance would be vital in crafting this legislation, fine tuning it. And our video developer is Amy Lawrence in the back. So maybe we make this a priority to put a video together for ADU to protect consumers and put it on our website.
One comment, I think, for the video and recommendations, it's almost two different tracks. I see the ADUs going, right? It's traditional, I call it stick-built, where the contractor builds it on site, and then there's off-site manufacturing. I'm guessing there's probably more fraud in the off-site manufacturing, because these folks presenting it don't actually have a factory, so it's almost like two payment guidelines. One is if they're building on site, two is if they're promising you they're gonna show up with a crane and drop this in one day. So there's different payment methods, a lot of those plans already pre-done, so there's different kind of payment recommendations I would think we'd wanna make for both those scenarios.
If I could, the chair, what Alan just said, it's true, and a lot of that happens. And as part of the video as well, if you would like, just putting in the back of your head so you remember, the problem you have is when people are buying these ADUs or these module units or these roll-up units that you can just plop down, they don't realize that, you know, electricity and sewer and water and all, you know, gas if needed, is not there, and it has to be brought to those. A lot of people think, oh, I got this whole unit and I drop it into place and plug it in and we're good to go. It doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of other things that happen, and I'm sure, I know 100% that a lot of the complaints you probably have are people going, oh, we bought this ADU from contractor A, they built it, they put it on a slab and it's all in the back, and they left. But when we went to go flush the toilet, there was no water, and when we went to, when we went to turn on the electricity, there was no power. Well, they said they'll build you the ADU, but they didn't do the sewer, they didn't do the water, they didn't do the electricity. They don't want to deal with, the municipalities and they're just putting the unit, and they're leaving everything else up to you. So I think that's another part that has to be clarified to the consumer, saying, if you're doing A, you want to make sure B and C are a part of it as well, because if you don't, A is not going to work. So we got to make sure that that's part of it. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. It's just breaking it all down and making sure it's easily understood. So I'm willing to help any way you need, Dave.
Through the chair, if I may, I really like the idea of the video, and I'd like to see if we could work to make that actually an integral part for the consumer of the permitting process. So it's not just look at CSLB and they have this video and that's great, but when you go in to sign up and say this is what we're planning on doing, by the way, part of the process is you listen to this and you watch this so you're educated. So.
All right, thank you, Board Member Ruin. Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, are there any other questions or comments from the public?
Good morning again, Rick Pierce, forwarding a message from Bill Remuelin. The Flashing Barricade Association supports the ADU proposal.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no members of the public, would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal to add accessory dwelling units to the definition of home improvement?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Second for discussion. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, do I have a call for the question? Let's to vote on it.
Call the question.
All right, thank you. The question's been called. Robin, would you take the roll, please?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Guy has an excused absence, and Jacob Lopez has an excused absence. Diana Love,
Aye.
Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
Quick question. This is considered permanent, correct? The ADUs are considered permanent, not placed right now and then moved in a month from now.
That is the way we look at our license laws, being permanent, not readily removable.
Then aye. Aye.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz, and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
And thank you, board members, and thank you for all your comments and questions. Shows how committed this board is to protecting the public and taking everything into consideration. Well, now moving on to the next item on our agenda is item 3B, which is related to the ADU proposal we just discussed, but has its own agenda number because it would apply to all individuals who violate progress payment laws, not just those working on ADUs. Accordingly, it is appropriate for the board to discuss this proposal separately and take a separate motion and vote to approve it. CSLB enforcement staff find that some licensees fail to abide by progress payment laws and then fail to complete or even start the work they agreed to, causing significant financial harm. This proposal would strengthen existing administrative penalties to discourage would-be offenders from taking excessive payments and failing to deliver the work or materials outlined in their contract. Specifically, this proposal would subject individuals, both licensed or unlicensed, who violate progress payment provisions to a $10,000 fine if the violation causes financial injury to a consumer in an amount greater than 10% of the contract price. It also subjects licensees to potential revocation for violations of progress payment provisions. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing no board member comments or questions, let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item?
That would be the floor for assessing the $10,000 penalty is 10%. Suppose the contract was a $5,000 project, and thus the damages would only be $500 to trigger the $10,000 penalty, which is twice the amount of the contract. And the reason that I thought of this was since handymen are now exempt, but since they're considered to be an unlicensed worker, even the $1,000 maximum that they could do, they could conceivably be assessed a $10,000 penalty if the consumer asserted that they were damaged by $100. And I'm just wondering if there's an explanation or a rationale, or maybe if anyway, that when I was reading the proposal, those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Registrar Fogg.
Yeah, one thing we didn't put in the packet is the board has adopted complaint prioritization guidelines. We do prioritize certain types of complaints, and one is complaints that result in egregious harm. So when we talk about the 10%, our thought there is it's going to be for the more serious matters. Now, if contractors taking a small dollar contract and cause minimal harm, especially if it's within the parameters of the license bond, it's probably not, for a first offense, that's likely not going to result in an administrative action. But we need to have something in place where the contractor has, in fact, taken, one case that I looked at very carefully, where they took $70,000 and did not do any work. They did nothing towards the project. Well, we need something to go in and tell, to support our administrative action, but also to help the district attorneys understand that we are prioritizing the referrals to them. I hope that answers your question, but we have to use discretion, use good judgment in how we handle our consumer complaints with the limited resources that we do have.
Thank you, Registrar Vogt. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, would a board member like to make a motion to support the board sponsorship?
Motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
I got the motion and second. All right, is there any discussion? All right, would anyone like to call for the question? That would
Call
be
the question.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. All right, Robin, would you call the roll?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love. Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
Aye.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 9-1.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, board members. Now moving on to the next item on our agenda. Item 3C is a proposal to raise enforcement fine minimums. The proposal can be found in the materials on page 92. This issue was included in the board's 2023 Sunset Review Report, which was approved by the board on December 13, 2023, but a solution was not ultimately included in the board's Sunset Review Bill, SB 1455. While CSLB's maximum enforcement fine amounts are clearly established in the statute, minimum enforcement fines are non-existent, or in the case of citing for unlicensed practice, exceedingly low when compared to the maximum amount, $200 versus $15,000. This results in administrative law judges, ALJs, frequently and significantly reducing fines during citation appeals. To put this in perspective, fine amounts for citations issued in fiscal year 2023 to 2024 that under appeal are being lowered by approximately 50%. These reductions result in fines that are not commensurate with the violation, do not adequately support Enforcement Division workload, do not provide an incentive to comply with the contractor's law, and provide minimal ability for the board to recuperate the cost of litigating an administrative citation. Specifically, this proposal would establish enforcement fine minimums commensurate with recent statutory maximum increases and require future increases to minimum fine amounts to be based on increases to the Consumer Price Index every 5 years. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, no further board member comments. Let's take public comment. Are there any members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item? All right, would a board member like to make a motion?
Motion to approve staff recommendation.
All right, we got that. We got the regular moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? To sponsor, thank you. All right. Support the board's sponsorship. Thank you for that, Ms. May. So the motion is the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal. And we got a regular moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, do I call for the question?
Motion's call the question.
Thank you, Chair Mark. All right, Robin, would you please take the roll?
Who is the second motion?
Me.
Michael Mark,
Aye.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Aye.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love, Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
Aye.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tucker both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, board members. On to agenda item 3D, which is a proposal regarding attorney fees on claims against a cash deposit in lieu of a surety bond. This proposal can be found in the materials on page 95. Like the previous proposal, this issue was also identified in the board's 2023 Sunset Review Report and approved by the board on December 13, 2023, but not included in the board's Sunset Review Bill, SB 1455. This proposal would expressly provide that CSLB is not liable for attorney fees in civil actions involving a contractor's cash deposit on a licensed bond. Contractors are required to maintain a contractor's bond for damages resulting from defective construction or other contractor's law violations. Contractors who do not want to use a surety company for their required license bond may make a cash deposit to CSLB to meet this requirement. Contractors' law prohibits CSLB from releasing any portion of the deposit for any purpose in a civil action unless directed by the court. In 2023, a Deputy Attorney General representing CSLB in a routine cash deposit in lieu of bond case alerted CSLB that an appellate court case known as the Carton case was being used to argue that CSLB should be liable for a consumer attorney's fees in a civil case against a contractor. The consumer's attorney asked the court to treat CSLB as a surety while CSLB holds a cash deposit for defendant contractors, exposing CSLB to potential liability. Although CSLB is not a surety and must not release a deposit or any portion of it except by court order, this proposed statutory amendment is meant to prevent any potential allegations that CSLB might be liable for attorney fees or costs in cash deposit cases. There are approximately 300 cash deposits on file for which CSLB would be held liable for attorney's fees in civil cases in which CSLB is simply complying with the law by awaiting instruction from the court. This exposure is contrary to the policy and purpose behind cash deposits, which is simply to provide contractors who do not want to use a surety company with another way to comply with the contractor's bond requirement. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board members' comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none. Are there any public comments on this item? All right, would a board member like to make a motion to support the board's sponsorship of a legislative proposal to specify CSLB is not liable for attorney fees in civil claims involving a contractor's cash deposit on a licensed bond?
So moved. Cool.
Second.
We have a second. All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, any call for the question?
Call for the question.
Thank you. Ms. Love, the question's been called. Robin, would you please take the roll call vote?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza,
Aye.
Alan Guy,
Yes.
Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos,
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love, Henry Nutt,
Aye.
Steve Pinelli,
Aye.
Joseph Preciado,
Aye.
Jim Ruane,
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tykert both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, board members. On to the next item on our agenda, review, discussion, and possible action on 2025 proposed non-substantive updates to contractor state license law. Agenda items 4A through D are related to non-substantive updates to contractors law and can be found in the materials on page 101. Each year, the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee authors a bill to make minor revisions to statutes related to the programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs. This bill is commonly known as the Omnibus Bill. Because this bill deals with more programs than just CSLB, any proposals included should be non-controversial, minor, and at no cost. The Omnibus Bill provides CSLB with a valuable opportunity to identify and correct errors of inconsistencies within contractors' law, therefore minimizing confusion for staff and the public and enhancing compliance among licensees and applicants. This proposal would make 4 non-substantive minor changes to contractors' law. First, it clarifies that a violation of advertising requirements for motor vehicles registered with CSLB is cause for discipline. While CSLB has explicit authority to enforce its laws, clarifying the board's authority within this section will minimize confusion and support compliance among licensees. Second, this proposal conforms existing statute establishing an inactive license status by specifying workers' compensation insurance is not required for inactive licensees. Licensees who hold an inactive license status are prohibited from performing construction work that requires an active license, and accordingly do not need to maintain the same requirements as an active license. This includes maintaining a current workers' compensation policy or a workers' compensation policy exemption on file with CSLB at all times. While the provisions related to workers' compensation insurance already exclude inactive licensees, workers' compensation is not mentioned in provisions establishing an inactive status. Third, CSLB's recent sunset bill, SB 1455, provided that licensees subject to a workmanship complaint resulting in a letter of admonishment or a citation are required to reimburse CSLB's industry expert costs to investigate the complaint. This proposal clarifies the reimbursement is not due until the citation or letter of admonishment is final, ensuring CSLB is not requesting or collecting a reimbursement when the citation or letter of admonishment is under appeal or if it is withdrawn or dismissed by CSLB. Lastly, this proposal corrects a mislettered cross-reference in contractors' law regarding home improvement salesperson. Unlike the previous proposals we voted to sponsor, the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee is the sponsor of the omnibus bill, so we're only voting to submit this proposal to the committee, not to sponsor it. Now I would like to turn this over to the board for discussion. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item?
Yeah, question on the vehicle signage. Does this mean every vehicle that a contractor owns has to have your name and license number on it?
No, it does not. It's only vehicles that are commercially registered.
I think all contractors' vehicles are commercially registered.
The answer would be yes.
DMV?
Because I know a lot of contractors have vehicles with names on them. They usually have a license. There's also a lot of contractors that have vehicles that aren't marked at all with their companies. There's probably some outside right now. So curious if it applies to every vehicle.
Register folk, or should we get the legal opinion or get back to that?
No, pretty familiar with that section of law. If the vehicles are commercially registered, many of the smaller contractors that might have vehicles that are not owned by the business itself, they wouldn't be commercially registered. I know we've looked into this in the past, and many times the vehicles are over a certain weight. I don't know, Steve, if you want to look at that, but what we're looking at though in practice is if we're going out to a job site and there are generally trucks that are at that site, and if they're commercially registered, it's very important for our enforcement staff to know if that's a licensed contractor. That's the benefit of it. At a job site, we can check the business name, the license number, find out it's clear and active, and go on to the next site. It's also an identifier for our industry partners when they suspect unlicensed activity, they report to our SWIFT unit. That's the rationale behind it, but that's the way we look at the law. If it's commercially registered, belongs to the business, then they have to have the license number and the business name on the vehicle.
It's kind of an interesting point that you bring up, board member Guy, because I have an old 1968 Ford F-100, and because of the weight, it has a commercial license. So even though it's just my primary vehicle, so I don't know if we need to look any more into that, because that's an interesting point you bring up.
It could be something that the chair may want to consider for a ledge committee meeting in the future. I don't think the intent here, though, is to make any significant changes to the existing requirement. Yeah.
And just to add on to that, there's a 2003 statute. We're simply adding teeth to it with the disciplinary response. That there was no way to enforce 7029-6 since 2003 without this added language. So we're here adding the language, and if you want to agendize something about limiting signage on a future meeting, we could do that.
Yeah, I think that's good, because that's a good point you bring up. So maybe something through the chair we look into later.
Yeah, we should add it as a future agenda item. There's
I
a
think
lot of vehicles registered to contractors. There's a lot of vehicles registered to contractors that aren't marked out there.
and this is obviously current professions codes added, they're only adding this one red line failure to comply with the section, right? So it's already a law, but what you're saying, it's kind of the mechanism now.
I would propose to remove discipline before we figure this out.
I don't think we can change the language, but yeah, I have a license on mine, it's Pepe 68, so that's my license plate. All right, any other board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, any public comment? All right, would any board members like to make a motion to submit the omnibus proposal to the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee for inclusion in the committee's omnibus bill?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I make a motion to amend and remove this item we just talked about, the discipline statement? Leave it as is till we have another meeting on it?
Yeah, certainly. We have a second on that amendment?
Second.
All right, second. We do it, or any discussion?
I think to move this forward, maybe the amendment should be like may cause, add the word may, so it can continue moving this thing forward, and then may cause for disciplinary action. I don't know if that is a acceptable amendment. Instead of the failure to comply with this section constitutes a cause for disciplinary action, just add the word may, and then that at least gives our enforcement team the teeth that would be needed.
That amendment could certainly be made under this item.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So with no discussion on amendment to the motion, we'll call for the question.
So my ask, so I was the official second, and so the request was to amend my motion. So first, to the motion maker, would that be?
Okay, so it's to amend my motion. Okay, so.
Two amendments.
We'll amend the motion to, what do we?
The amendment would be failure to comply with this section may
May cause.
constitute a
To may
cause
cause
of
disciplinary
disciplinary action.
Okay.
And the other three amendments, non-substantive, would remain the same.
Correct. So what he said. So.
If you're permitting that amendment, is there a
Make the
second?
motion to, yeah, go ahead.
I'll second it, Diana Love.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? All right, the call for the question?
Call for the question.
All right, thank you. And this amendment to the motion would carry the motion. So Robin, would you call the vote?
Michael Mark,
Yes.
Miguel Galarza, Alan Guy, Joel Barton,
Aye.
Rodney Cobos. Aye. Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love. Aye. Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Taggart both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, board members. Now moving on to the next item on our agenda, review, discussion, and possible action to authorize staff to initiate non-substantive regulatory changes under the Section 100 rule without seeking advance board approval. And for the final item on today's agenda, if you're tired of listening to me, I would like to turn it over to Legislative Chief, Ms. May.
Yeah, we are.
Thank you, Member Barton, and again, good morning, Chair Mark and board members. Today, I am seeking your approval to allow CSLB staff to initiate the regulatory process for minor or non-substantive regulatory changes without first seeking the board's approval. These non-substantive and minor regulatory changes are referred to as a Section 100 change. The Section 100 process allows an agency like CSLB to add, revise, or delete text from the California Code of Regulations without complying with the general rulemaking process because the proposed change is minor and non-substantive. Some examples of regulatory changes that would qualify for Section 100 include renumbering or reordering an existing regulatory provision, deleting a regulatory provision when its statutory authority has been repealed, or correcting a grammatical or punctuation error. Section 100 rulemakings move much quicker through the regulatory process because they do not require a public comment period, nor do they require the same level of supporting documentation as a regular rulemaking would. Again, a Section 100 is only applicable for non-substantive changes to regulations. Historically, CSLB staff have sought the board's approval prior to filing a Section 100 change, though this is not required by the law, nor the Office of Administrative Law. Your approval today would allow staff to move quickly to make minor updates to regulations without having to wait for the next quarterly board meeting, would reduce the number of items on meeting agendas, and ultimately conserve board member and staff time to be spent on more pressing work. If you decide today to waive initial approval of Section 100 rulemakings, I will still provide updates at our regularly scheduled board meetings on any Section 100 changes. Rest assured, regular substantive rulemakings are still subject to the board's advance approval, so there'd be no change there. I'll turn it back to Chair Barton, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Are there any board member comments or questions on this item? All right, seeing, go ahead.
Would there be a highlighted or some kind of notation that something was changed for the public to see that something's been changed?
It would be filed with the Office of Administrative Law,
Okay.
and that's public. Again, and it goes through like a pretty big vetting process just the same. It goes through the Department of Consumer Affairs, the agency above us, and then the governor's office, and they all have to agree that it's non-substantive, and then we would file with OAL.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rebecca, if I could, what you're asking is that you not have to get approval before you start the process, but once you've made the changes that you're recommending, you would bring that to the board before going to Office of Administrative Law, no?
No, just to be able to file with OAL. Because again, they're non-substantive, so I don't know that, I mean, I think it's a time-saving measure so that we can move a bit more quickly. These are, like I said, pretty minor items, like it's renumbering, it's changing a erroneous cross-reference, it's that kind of stuff. So I don't know that that's, I mean, of course, it's to the board's, decision if they want to authorize staff to do that. We could, if you wanted to maybe review again after, like maybe in a year's time and see what staff has done, and then if it was, maybe not what the board had expected, to then ask for review. But again, I was thinking, especially after today's long legislative agenda, you might not want to hear from me on these kind of minor tweaks.
David, just so you know, we do codes and standards all the time where changes happen with numbering or lettering, or we see verbiage that's wrong. So they have the authority to go in and make those changes accordingly. We get a notification based on a printout that comes out towards the middle of the year or the end of the year once it's been done, just for the minimal changes, and it doesn't really affect anything that's, stating, oh, you can't do this. Oh, we're just gonna take that out because we don't like it. No, it's, oh, you can't do this, and it was number 1, 2, 3, but now it's 1, 2, 3, 4 because something else preceded that, and now it changed. It's just a renumbering or text that was like written wrong. We get notified that it's done, but it doesn't make any changes. But we don't get anything, so I'm also on the board there. We don't get anything from the board saying, do we approve those changes? They're automatically done, and we're just given the, here's what it was, this is what it is after the fact. And if there's something that was major, then we can always go back to it, but 99% of the times, it's not.
I also would just thank you for the staff looking for ways to make our time more efficient.
Trying.
I do have a quick question, based on what Steve just said. Is that item that can be attached in our booklet, like just to show what was done, just so we can just read it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, we would just continue it in the.
Yeah, once a year or
have it in the
something,
materials.
updated, an
Or-
updated page or
Yeah.
something. Okay, thank you.
All right, great, thank you. Any further board member comments or questions? All right, are there any public comment on this item? All right, thank you. Would a board member like to make a motion to allow CSLB staff to promulgate Section 100 rulemakings without advance board approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right, been regularly moved second. Any discussion? All right, do I have call for the question?
Call for the question.
All right, thank you. Robin, would you take the roll, please?
Michael Mark.
Yes.
Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Joel Barton.
Aye.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo and Jacob Lopez both have excused absences. Diana Love. Henry Nutt.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Joseph Preciado.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Thomas Ruiz and Mary Tygart both have excused absences. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you, Robin. And with you all, this concludes the legislative items for today. So thank you, and back to Chair Mark.
Thank you, Legislative Chair Barton. I remember that being the chair of that committee, there's a lot of conversations usually. With that, we're going to take a quick break. The time now is 11:01. We'll take a break till 11:11.